Reputation. I'm Brandon Lee, and hey, today we're going to talk about this concept of funnels. And man, I think funnels. The title today is "Buyers Don't Follow Funnel; They Follow Leaders, or they follow visible leaders specifically." And we're going to talk a little bit about what the heck does this mean? I think we've been inundated with funnels for about 15 years now. I'll say 2010. And it's all been about the funnel, the funnel, the funnel. And I think in 2014, just pick a date, pick a year. 2014, internet was still new, digital marketing was new, digital selling, social selling, all these new terms over the last 15 to 20 years were coming out. And I think this concept of working the funnel really made a lot of sense. And I wonder now in 2025, is funnel still the right way to discuss it? Primarily because it seems like we're getting back to relationships matter. I'm personally a big believer that relationships have always mattered. But I know there was a push in certain industries about relationships not being as important. But I want to bring this back to what does it mean to be a visible leader? And how do we use that visibility as leaders to fuel our opportunities? Whether you want to call that a funnel or a flywheel or anything else, I actually really don't care. I think the conversation today is about how do we make ourselves more visible? How do we take the offline that we've learned and know for a couple of decades or more, and we apply it into this digital world? So Scott Boulas is going to join us today. He and I became connected through LinkedIn. We started having chats in comments and then chats in direct messaging to moving to a Zoom call. You know the way it works, right? We built relationship in the modern digital way. And I would ask Scott to come on board because he, after spending a lot of years in the healthcare industry, he started to take a look at LinkedIn a little bit differently. So everybody, welcome Scott Boulas to the show. His company is called The Real New Growth Strategies. And Scott, welcome.
Hey, Brandon. It's great to be here. I'm really delighted to be here. Hopefully everybody gets a little bit out of today.
Hey, I'm sure they will. If you just share like you did with me and in our Zoom call, everybody will get something out of it, I think. So, well, Scott, I'm going to just take us back a little bit, give us that brief history of your career, and want to move us to LinkedIn, of course, and digital reputation, your visibility as a leader. But take us back a little bit until you had that aha moment around LinkedIn. And as you said, I realized I needed to do it differently than I have been.
Right. No, thank you. So I'm an ex-Army officer. I've been in the healthcare industry for roughly 30 years. The healthcare industry is interesting because we really always did get access to doctors and vice presidents and C-level. We could just walk right in the hospital, especially if you were working for a big reputable company. Delivered about $1 billion in value and revenue over those 30 years, maybe more. Some people say I'm underestimating that. I'm trying to be conservative. And I probably used LinkedIn the same way everybody else did in that industry, just occasionally to, network with people in my industry, occasionally to read something that a doctor or CEO might have published. But very, 3% of the value of LinkedIn. And so what started to shift for me was when the pandemic of COVID occurred, it was much more difficult to get access. And then there was a lot of turmoil. There's a severe shortage of critical physicians in healthcare. So you had to be a little bit more strategic. And I just started paying attention to LinkedIn. I'd spend about an hour a day watching what other people were doing. And I decided I wanted to start to try some of it. And it started to work for me. And then when I really had my big breakthrough was I decided to resign from a role because my father was passing away. I was trying to determine what I wanted to do next with my career. I considered some solopreneurship, and this was roughly 18 months ago. And literally, I just became much more active on LinkedIn, and we can talk more about what that means for me, and what it's produced for me in terms of outcomes. But that's when the big shift started happening. Was roughly a year and a half ago.
Got it. Got it. Excellent. Well, first thing, Butch, thanks for joining us today and throwing your comment. I'm looking forward to the insights that Scott has to share with us today. And for everyone else,
Hey, Butch.
if you're on the podcast, thank you for joining us. This is a newer show for me. If you know me from my other show, this is a newer show, and I'd be really grateful. You find value in it, give me a review. Give us a review there. You find something really valuable, screen capture it, text it to somebody and say, hey, check this out, or something like that would be grateful. And if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or anywhere else that we're streaming this, if you're on with us live and you comment, we'll be able to see it. We'll bring it up on screen. If you have questions for Scott, we can answer those. He can answer those as well. But I want to come back. I want to set this up, what you were just saying, Scott, and then move us into another question. I think a lot of industries that I've been in or I work with, from the printing industry and others in the publishing industry, traditionally have been a very face-to-face dominant space. And I like what you said. Traditionally, it was really easy for you to get face-to-face time. And after COVID, and I think it's not just a COVID related thing, I believe that the growth of so many startups means there's tens of thousands more companies out there than before. So it's a lot more competition for headspace. The automated emails tools that are out there means more companies are also automating their messaging out. So buyers are getting bombarded with emails even more. More companies, more tools to help companies email means buyers are getting bombarded. And then the same thing with cold calling. More companies means more people making calls, plus add technology to it, and you got a whole bunch more calls going into people. So I think it was this combination. It's easy for us to say COVID, but I think there's also this tech and startup and new business world that have infiltrated every industry. And all of a sudden, I think a lot of buyers were just like, well, wait a minute, this is a lot. But with COVID, less face-to-face, there was less travel for a while. And so you and I had talked before about people they're known in a room, they're known at an event, but they're not known beyond that. And it's limiting. So I think you experienced that gap. You experienced that when you said you started looking at LinkedIn a little differently and wanted to use it different than what most people did. Can you speak into that a little bit? And
Absolutely. And I was most recently the CEO of an open MRI company, and I got thousands of those messages, and I hated them. And I said, that doesn't work. What am I going to do differently? But I think, to me, this may seem like an old-fashioned concept, but to me, it's more relevant today than it's ever been. And it's hello, George. Hi.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, thanks for joining us, George.
You know, it's this idea of, my mom used to call it the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So I'd like to reach out to every one of those salespeople and say, is that how how people earn your trust? Is that how you like to be sold to? So do unto others, to me, if we follow that principle, we solve 99% of those problems. So what I did differently was I said, these are companies and people that I'm interested to get to know. And I made a manageable list, not a huge list. I would not recommend a huge list. I promised myself I'm not going to over leverage technology. I'm going to be real and authentic. And I followed every single one of them. And I read everything they posted. And every comment people I followed commented on. And I did that for a while to kind of get an idea of what was important to the organization and what was important to those people. And I'm also a fan of saying we're all human beings first. We have families. Some of us have issues. Some of us, I'm going off to a college graduation this weekend. I'm not just all work. And so I try to meld all that into a plan of I read their comments and I thoughtfully comment on it. And I'm going to give you an example here in a second, because I know that's a little bit. Don't just like it. Don't just say, hey, great post, great comment. Don't just say like this. Really have a thoughtful comment. So when I took on the role as CEO of MR Open Evo, I made a decision. Most of my background is in the hospital-based provider space, some private practice, but I made a decision that this was not a traditional radiology magnet. This was a magnet that was best for orthopedics and sports medicine and ortho surgery. And I know nobody. So I hit the wall. I hit the wall of trust. I could used to walk into rooms. I had to figure it out differently. So what I did was, and I'm going to make it very specific. Ortho Virginia is one of the largest orthopedic practices on the East Coast. Hundreds of doctors. I just read everything they posted. And I'd say something like, I love that you're doing this community education day for elderly people, because a lot of elderly people need to have these surgeries. My dad did, and he was afraid and confused. So I love that you're making people less afraid and confused. That's great for the community. And I'd say things like that.
Quick question. Did you talk about your dad as well and what your dad was going through? And what I'm getting to, you and I talked about this blend of kind of the personal humanity content with business education and kind of marrying those two together.
Of course I did. And I'd say, my dad recently passed. I was with him. He was considering, replacement knee surgery. He was confused. I wish he had these types of resources. But what I was doing was I was honestly reinforcing what they were trying to accomplish. And I do that 2 or 3 times. And the chief marketing officer commented to my comment. And I said, thank you. I think you're doing a great job. And I'll leave her name out of it. I went to DM and I said, here's why I'm interested in your organization. Just real honest, And she said, I'll get you a meeting with our chief operating officer. I met with the chief operating officer. She put me on a meeting with 4 regional presidents. So that's how it happens.
Okay.
It's cliche, but and I am a little older than you, Brandon, but it's cliche, but people don't, care what you know until they know that you care. And I was trying to show that I was seeking first to understand them. I was sincerely connecting with them and thought I might be able to help them. And that was the reason for the connection.
Awesome. So I've got a lot of questions around that for clarity for me and for other people, because I think what you're saying, I think it's really important. I think the challenge with saying it the way you said it is I can hear a lot of CEOs or sales leaders going, oh, well, we don't have time for that, right? Why don't we just pick up the phone and call? If somebody were just to say that after what you just shared, how would you respond to that?
I would say those MRIs were worth $1 million. And I would say it's a year-long selling cycle, and I accomplished all that in about 2 weeks. Save time, save expense, get to value faster.
Yeah,
is what I would say. And I also would say, and you and I talked about this. I think one of the most brilliant business leaders, although he was somewhat controversial, was Steve Jobs. Mm-hmm. And Steve Jobs, through some of these videos we can still go out and see on YouTube today, if LinkedIn would have been around, Steve Jobs would have been the face of Apple on LinkedIn, I promise you. So I would say if it's good enough for Steve Jobs, it's good enough for you.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying there, and I've shared this story quite a lot, is that what Steve Jobs did, what Bill Gates did in those years, pre-LinkedIn, pre-YouTube, pre a lot of digital content, was they built a brand around themselves. And I know a lot of business leaders they hate the term personal brand. Fine, put it away. They built their reputation. and they used PR, right? They probably had multiple $1 million budgets per month for their PR teams that were designed to get them on magazines and interviewed in newspapers, interviewed on the news, at behind the podium at big events where they could speak to thousands and thousands of people. And you have to ask yourself why. And it's, well, because the more well known they are, they grow their business brand simultaneously. But we always know that people connect better with people than they do with brands, especially in B2B, right? I mean, I think now it's also why, like, even Salesforce is doing commercials with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. Why? Well, because most of us love those guys and love the movies that they put out and the shows that they're in. And we're going to remember Salesforce more because we remember the people than we are if we just think about Salesforce as a tech platform.
Right, right. And there are so many examples of where it simply works. And I think George asked the question.
Yeah.
And George, I would say to you,
That,
when I said I don't want to use too much technology, I'm meaning Chat GPT or anything like that that's going to generate something for me. I want it to be real and come from my mind. I do use Sales Navigator. I do use Sales Navigator in addition to LinkedIn. And frankly, I find it a little frustrating because then you're working with two sets. And so what I do is I time block and spend time in one, as well as then time block and spend time in Sales Navigator.
Yeah, George, thank you for that question. That's a great question. Scott, when you started commenting on other people's posts, you also mentioned to me earlier that you posted a little bit differently. You were doing some educational content. You were doing a little bit of what I tend to call humanity content.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your posting strategy. And then I am going to go back to commenting because I believe commenting is more important. But I do know that most people want to go to, what do I post? What do I say?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is I think of it as a schedule. I think of it as ratios or percentages. I want to post, 10% of the time something personal.
What do you mean by that? Tell me what you mean by personal. I think that's
so some of my largest posts ever was when my father passed away. My father was a infantry colonel in the Army. He served in 2 wars, and he was my hero. He was my rock, and I dealt with it in public, really, so people would understand, who my father was and what he meant to me. I posted when I had to put my dog down. I posted when my granddaughter turned 4. I post about earlier in my career, I was a coach in what's called landmark education. A lot of people know what that is. I was actually a self-expression and leadership coach, but I took some of that and I've posted around, things like observations. Why do little children see the world as endless possibilities, and we're all filled with self-doubt and fear and stress? And so I posted a picture of 2 of our youngest children. And I said, what do they want to be when they grow up? One wants to be a quarterback for the Jets, and a gazillionaire is what the start of the post was. And those posts get reach.
Right.
But they also let people know who I am as a person. And so another part of the concept of this podcast, as you described it to me, is trust. Mm-hmm. And to me, trust is reliability, truth, strength. Can I count on you? Integrity. That's trust. Yeah. And the things that I post about personally, I think build trust in who I am as a human being. Then I post. I always post on holidays. I do something like you do, or you used to do, the dad jokes. I do something Chicago Friday Fun Day, right? I do little differently on the weekends than I do during the week. I haven't figured out the perfect. I mean, I notice some people are posting 4 or 5 times a day. I'm usually once a day, and I do try and do it every single day, and I have for almost a year now. And during the week, it's educational marketing, and it's literally just, what you know what you're good at, what you've done well in the past, where your successes come from, and I've just got a long list. I keep it in a Word doc. Some people probably have better technology, and I say, what do I want to talk about today?
Yeah.
Or I'll be inspired when I walk the dogs in the morning, or I'll be inspired by a meme or a quote. But I try and have balance in my posting.
Yeah, so I want to tap into that balance, and I want to tap into the inspiration. I think, because I think so many people I talk to, it's like they don't know what to post. Then they're scared that they'll post something bad. I think we're moving out of the cancel culture that we experienced for a while. I think everybody's not quite as sensitive to be canceled as we were a few years ago. But I think there's always that fear. I don't know what to publish, and then what if I publish something bad and it gets me in trouble with anybody? But I hear you saying, what's that?
You just say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it then.
Well, I think the fear is that when I reference the cancel culture, there was a season there where there was no ability to even say I'm sorry. There was no ability to say, oh, hey, you know what, I did that 15 or 20 years ago, and I just didn't realize then what I was doing. And I mean, there was a lot of stuff of applying modern thinking to old pictures or old videos or old actions of 20, 30 years ago, and then being held accountable today, even though the mindset and stuff was different. So I think there's part of that fear. I mean, I hear it all the time when we talk to prospective clients about whether they want to use a show as a source of content, do more of a thought leadership campaign as a source of content. One of the biggest things is fear. I don't know what to write. But what I hear, I don't know what to share. But I heard you say, Scott, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you've got educational content, which is just sharing your experience, and then you've got some other stuff that just kind of whatever inspires you around. You use the word personal, which I tend to stay away from because I never know what people think with that term. But I like to use the word humanity.
Yeah, I love it.
When you're sharing educational content from your experience, kind of get us into the granular. Like, how do you do that? What's the tone? How do you think about what you want to share from your experience?
Yeah, and I would say it's evolving, right? The more cycles I have, and maybe the reason I don't remember the cancel culture is I'm still fairly new at using LinkedIn the way I'm using it today versus 5 years ago. So I think you've got to have you have to have a visual of who you want to and can help, right? Small to mid-sized founders that want to leverage LinkedIn to extend their brand and be the face of their company. That's who you're reaching out to, right? You have to have a picture of that person. You kind of almost have to walk a mile in their shoes and say, what could they be experiencing right now? Well, right now it's tariffs, and I don't know if I want to go there. And I try and steer clear of political and religion, but me personally, but you got to kind of understand some of the challenges they're going through. Are they losing customers for some reason? Is there huge employee turnover? Is the work from home impacting them? In my case, I'm going more after how do you grow? Do you get stuck? Do you get bogged down in the day-to-day and every personnel decision that you can't think of, sales and marketing more strategically? Should I be doing something different? Right. Mm-hmm. And you understand what the issues and you literally probe at that issue with your hook. You educate, here's how you could do it differently. Here's a better outcome. And then with a call to action. And that's how I tend to think of it. And it is evolving. It is evolving. I really have become a curious student of what others are doing and I'm trying a little bit of different things to find out what's going to work for me better. But the thing I will tell you, I'm not afraid to send a personal video or personal audio as well. Those things I think are under leveraged on the platform.
I agree with that. I think they're under. I love them as tools. The question is the content, and you've already talked earlier about the content, about your tone with comments, your tone with your posts. As long as we don't get into pitch slapping people, like, you don't know me, but can I get 30 minutes of your time because I'm awesome? I don't think it matters really if you send an audio note, you send a video, you send a written message. I think those are just low probability activities.
So for me, I find a reason to connect. That's why I study so much before. That's why I study so much before I reach out. It gives me a reason to connect. An easy one for me is, we're both ex-military. Thank you for your service. Or, I see that this is a cause you're interested in. So am I. Or, to try and find a personal reason to connect.
We can.
George has another question. You want me to take it? Yeah.
Yeah, you can do it now. Yeah.
Yeah, George, great question.
So let me read it for everybody, especially on the podcast. So George asked, Scott, do you write your daily posts ahead of time and then schedule their delivery?
Okay. I have done some of that. I would say I am someone, and it might be because I'm writing a book at the same time. And what my book is about is how the things I learned as a young Army officer have benefited me in business. I tend to be pretty creative, and I have never had writer's block. Maybe I'm just wired differently. I sit down, I say, I'm not getting up until I, and I usually have an idea. So I've done a little bit of that, but I just tend to sit down and write.
Yeah.
I walk my dogs in the morning. I walk my dogs in the morning. I try and let whatever's going to come into me, and then I come home. I write. I comment for an hour, and then I put it away for a while, and I do something else.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing a trend across taking the dog for the walk in the morning. My friend and our client, Chris Dunn, who has a show with us called The Exhibitor's Toolbox, he sells exhibits. But what he does as part of his creative process and his content is every morning he goes for a walk with his dog. And he uses that time of thinking and being creative, what he sees, what he thinks about, and that becomes a lot of his daily content of just kind of sharing the journey of what he's thinking about and what's important to him. And so now there's two of you that do that.
Well, to me, it clears my head, right? There's no phone, there's no email, there's no stress. It clears my head, and it provides inspiration. I usually will put a couple questions in my head before I go for a walk. And sometimes it just comes to me, and most times it just comes to me. But that's a great question, George.
And George, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know a lot of people do that. That's what I do with my weekly newsletter. I try and stay 2 or 3 weeks out, but I daily, it's whatever's in me today that I feel is important to relay.
I like that model. I know there's people on both sides of that fence. I actually like the model of what inspires you to write today. Now, I've got about 3 topics that I generally talk about business-wise, and I try to make sure that I rotate through those from the education standpoint. But on the other piece, my humanity and like just kind of the journey of who I am, the experiences I've had, I try to let that be more organic, because if I think about something in the morning and go, wow, this has been really impactful for me, then that's something that I feel we presented a bit more organic and natural and real and raw. What do you think about that, Scott?
I totally agree. I totally agree. And yes, I do have a series of sales and marketing topics that I poke at. try and get people curious about my thoughts.
Yeah. Hey, George, if you're still here with us, I'm curious, how often are you creating content now? You asked two really great questions about LinkedIn to Navigator and how do you create your post. I'm curious what you're doing now and what you'd like to get to. Like, where would you like to be if the good old magic wand question, if you had a magic wand in your hand, what would you like to see for yourself? So, Scott, well, we're waiting to see if George is still there and answers that or gives us that information that we can respond to. Um, Tell me a bit more, like, what have you looked like? I always want to slow down when I talk to someone like you who said, I was here and now I'm here. And you say things like, well, I just started commenting, I started creating content, and then it's like the doors of heaven opened up and I got all these great opportunities. Right? And it's kind of, then when I talk to other people who are still sitting on the sidelines wondering what to do,
Right.
they look at that and they go, it doesn't make sense. Like, I've tried to comment, I've tried to post. Like, where do you think is that secret sauce for you? What has made this work really well for you, that to a point that you're like, hey, I want to come on the show and talk about LinkedIn, even though I haven't used LinkedIn for probably 95, 98% of my career,
Right.
but now I'm using it and I want to talk about it.
Well, I will also say I'm someone who never had a Facebook account, and I'm not really leveraging other social media like I could yet. Right? I'd love to someday have more of a YouTube presence, but I'm early in the journey, I would say. But I think for me, it was as simple as being very open-minded and watching others long enough and consistently enough to say there's got to be something here. Got to be something I'm missing. Maybe I'm the problem. Right? I was the guy that was pushing the company content. I would also say I spent a couple periods of time in my career at GE Healthcare, which is one of the premier organizations that sells the big stuff in the hospitals. Right, you get $1.5 million MRIs and $1.5 million MRIs, et cetera. And early on, I watched a good friend of mine who's the CEO of U.S. and Canada. It was cancer awareness. She and the CEO of all of GE Healthcare put on these silly looking pink wigs, and they could, they have big jobs. I mean, these are multi-billion dollar companies, and they're putting on a pink wig and being silly.
Yeah.
For cancer awareness.
Yeah.
And I would also say I was somebody probably earlier in my career that got the idea of complex selling and being able to connect the dots across complex organizations earlier than others did. And I saw some analogies to LinkedIn to what I had done well in the past to do, $50 million deals. Right, $20 million deals,
Right.
multi-year deals across complex organizations. Because I promise you, as somebody who was an ex-CEO, most times the CEO would appreciate someone having done all that research, right, and had all those interviews and all of those impact and discovery questions and stitched it together in a way that said, we aren't investing like this, but we should be.
Right.
And so I saw some similarities in LinkedIn there. And I think for me, it just, it appealed to my creativity. Like I said, I was open-minded. It was a way I really embraced the idea of trust isn't earned in an email, like a DM that I can delete in 10 seconds because you asked for 15 minutes of my time, or you copied and pasted and you didn't put my name in there. Right. They put Brandon instead of Scott. Right. So I'm just going to delete that. So it goes back to what I said earlier, do unto others. And it was a way for me to have one-to-many people know what I stood for.
Yeah. Were there, Scott, did you experience where you were paying attention to some people via LinkedIn in your industry, and then you kind of got the aha moment of like, wait, I keep seeing their content. I've been reading it. I feel like I know them from this. Like, is that when you kind of looked in the mirror and were like, wait, I can do this too? Or is that how'd you get there?
Literally, it's like that. I was
Yeah.
open minded. This is a marketing platform that, and that's probably not the term you would use. It's a socialization platform.
It's
It's
called
a
a social
connection.
network for a reason,
Yeah,
right? We're supposed
it's a
to be
connection platform,
social. I
and
mean, I think.
and it's a very low investment, right? I don't have to go buy
Yeah.
systems or SaaS that cost me a bunch of money. It was a tool that was,
Yeah.
priced right, and my mindset was right, and so I just started using it. And the more and more and more I watch people like you, um, and I'm still fairly early in my journey with it. I know there's some people that have been doing this every day for 5 to 6 years,
Mhm.
and have huge following and good business results. So I said, if it works for them, why wouldn't it work for me?
That's good. What kind of fears did you have pop up when you at least started thinking that way? Did you have any fears pop up?
Yeah, I think the only one I had was because I get called all the time. Do you want to come be the president of this division of this company? Scott, I got an opportunity for you back in healthcare to go lead a big sales force in North America. And unfortunately, my feet are on both sides of the fence. And I think my only fear is what I'm doing here hurting the ability for me to go back across that bridge.
Hmm.
I had no fear because honestly, you care about what the people you love and your family and your friends think about you. But I honestly don't care. I'm not going to disrespect someone and pitch slap them and ask for 30 minutes of their time or 15 minutes of their time and send them a Calendly link when I don't even know them. I'm going to try and have a dialogue. So, and some easy ways to do that is post-oply, ask an open-ended question, see if somebody answers you.
Hmm.
And then answer their question, ask another question.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a dialogue, not just on posting out there in a black hole to see what happens. It really
Do
does
you do the
become a dialogue.
open-ended?
What's that?
Do you do the open-ended question, tactic, if you will? I'm assuming that's just part of who you are now, but let's call it a tactic
Yeah.
for ease of use. You do that in your comments as well as your posts?
Yes. And honestly, that's something I could do more consistently.
Mhm. How do you determine who to go comment on? Again, I think you mentioned this briefly when you were talking about the example at the hospital, but overall, I mean, what I like what you're saying. Obviously, I know it works as well, and I also know that I hear, well, we don't have time for that, and my reaction is always, well, what are you doing with your time that's not working? Where you
Right.
could then spend your time on something that is working. So it's never a time issue. It means you don't have belief in this as a
Right.
tactic. But how do you determine whose post you want to comment on? How do you
Well,
go about doing that?
there's a couple of schools of thought. One, if I'm a B2B salesperson or sales leader, or in a more of a corporate role, America role, who are my potential customers, right? Who are my high value targeted customers? Um, in a solopreneur role, it's a couple of different things. It's who are my ideal clients that I want to start a relationship with, and also who are some other people in the same niche or genre or market niche as I am. And I want to comment and reinforce what they're doing so that when the people that follow them and are interested in what they're doing, they see you as someone who's credible, trustworthy,
Mhm.
can deliver results in the same area. And maybe you get some
Yeah.
pollination. I'm not trying to steal anybody's clients. I honestly, thoughtfully, what I will say is, I will say, I really love that idea. Well, I really love what you posted today, and here's why. Or I agree, but I sort of disagree. Or I might add this, and ask an
Yeah,
open-ended question. So all of those things further the dialogue. And I didn't get that. I mean, I'm just
absolutely.
a dumb ex-army officer, and I never had a Facebook, and I didn't get that until about a year and a half ago, and it really works. And I go back to what I said earlier. If your potential client, that CEO or founder of $100 million company, doesn't think it's worth the time, I would give him an example of two of where it was a hell of a lot easier than 100 cold calls and emails. It shrunk the sales cycle, got me
Yeah,
access faster.
yeah.
And
And I wonder with that too, like it, your reputation offline, I would imagine greatly influence the effectiveness of your activity online because when you send a message or you comment or you post, it's really easy for people to click and go look at your background and go, oh wow. So like that CMO for the hospital group that you were referring to, you commented a few times, they commented, you commented back, you sent a connection request and you shared who you are and what you do and they said, well yeah, let me get you connected to I think it was their
yep.
COO at that point. Um, what like if we peel the layers of that onion back, what do you think was what were all the different points that were so important for you to be successful in that process?
It absolutely, the first thing is really being thoughtful with who your targets are versus spamming everybody. Okay. Really understanding who your ideal, either individual client or target business is. That's really important. The second is, and it's an old saying, and I still use it, seek first to understand. Spend the
Mhm.
time to understand them, their issues, their concerns, their fears, their financial challenges, their customer challenges, their expense challenges, their revenue challenges, and have
Mhm.
a point of view, and then begin the dialogue.
Yeah.
And see what happens. And they don't all happen like that. You know that, and I know that. But there are enough in a
Mhm.
very short period of time. There are enough examples of where that understanding and that real, not the push. No, I mean that one happened fast. Most of them occur through a longer dialogue. I'm curious. What do
Yeah.
you do? I'm curious. I noticed people don't use competitors enough to probe. I see your competitor seems to be investing in this area of their business and winding down this area of your business. How are you reacting to that? That's a hell of a lot better than give me
Mhm.
15 minutes of your time. You
Right.
might get an answer to that one. And I'm sorry, I just cussed.
No, you're fine. You're totally fine. That's okay. Well, Scott, before we wrap up, I want to go into let you share a little bit about the recon mindset. I know this also has to do with the book that you're writing. I want to let you share a little bit about that and give a little bit of plug. I know it's not
Yep,
done yet, but what do you mean by the recon mindset, and what did military strategy
yep,
teach you about visibility and networking?
yeah. So in the military, you would never go into harm's way without understanding everything you possibly could about where's
Mhm.
the terrain advantage, what does the enemy appear to be doing, what's changing over the last 12 hours. And I've said this, so you never would do that. You would always leverage the every second and minute of time you had to gather information to refine your plans.
Right.
That's how I think of. I mean, my last job at GE Healthcare, I managed the team that managed all of Mayo Healthcare, the Mayo Clinic,
Mhm.
the Mayo Clinic, one of the best healthcare organizations in the world. I got called, hey, would you like to go do this job? I said, I don't know anybody there. At the time, I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, not in Rochester,
Mhm.
Minnesota, or Minneapolis. And so, what did I do? I reconned. I read all of their
Mhm.
financial information. I read all of their major press releases. I read everything that every executive said including on LinkedIn. And I put together a different kind of strategy, which meant I didn't try and sell them more MRIs and CTs. I tried to sell a bigger, more strategic relationship between the organizations, which worked. So, and you do the same thing with people. Hey, I noticed you said this was important to you. It's important to me too, right? What did you do in the military? I was an armor officer. Hey, that's pretty cool.
One thing I hear you saying, Scott, which is always interesting to me, is you're here saying, hey, LinkedIn has served me well. I've sold millions of dollars worth of product services through relationships I built with LinkedIn. This is valuable to me. And what you're saying is do the work, make it personal, do the research, figure it out. And then most of the time when I hear people that don't want anything to do with LinkedIn, their general first statement is, we don't have time for that. It's been and what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words, it's like, you don't have time not to do this, is kind of what I hear you saying. Is that accurate?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm saying when you're in an armored battalion and you have your platoons and I'm a company commander and we're going to attack an enemy, we spend every second we can understanding how to gain advantage, how to minimize losses, and how to win.
Yeah.
And to me, it just naturally makes sense. And the other thing I would say, I go back to what I said earlier, do unto others. I don't like when somebody approaches me and they copied and pasted and didn't change the name. They use some silly relationship connection, like, and I'm sorry if anybody does this that's listening, but hey, we have a few contacts in common. Well, so what? Right? Can I get 15 minutes of your time? I get 150 of those a week. Do you know what 150 times 15 minutes is? I'd never do anything else. You haven't earned the right. You haven't earned the right yet. So I've been a sales leader forever, and I hate when tell me when's the right time to close. It's the right time to close when you've earned the right to ask for their business. So
that's a good mic drop moment right there, Scott. We're at 47 minutes, and I'm shocked because I feel like we just got started, but I want to be sensitive to your time and everyone else's time. So thank you so much for joining us. If anybody wants to reach out and talk with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can DM me on LinkedIn. You can, my work email is scott@newgrowthstrategies.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is connected in my LinkedIn. We can start a dialogue there. So those are a couple ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your experiences with me. I really appreciate hearing not to play off the military side, but just sharing with us what goes on in the trenches, because you're just a real life guy that went, hey, I networked well offline, and now I see this digital world, and there's opportunity for me to here to do it wider, faster, and you went and figured it out.
I would also say, if you have the right mindset with it and have a little fun with it and be real, it can actually be quite rewarding and enjoyable.
Yeah. Scott, I appreciate you adding that at the end. I think for a lot of years with me, with LinkedIn especially, I don't think I was having fun with it. I didn't equate it to being like a networking event and just show up and be myself and have fun. I had this idea like, oh, it's kind of like a networking event, but unlike networking events, I showed up polished and tried to be who I thought I was supposed to be, not who I am. And it was frustrating because then I was one of those guys that said, man, I've been working LinkedIn and it just doesn't work. But I think I didn't work it the right way.
I wish I'd started earlier.
Absolutely.
And George and Robert and everybody, thank you for joining us. Great questions.
Yeah. Yeah, George, Butch, thanks so much for joining us today. And everybody, I don't remember who we have next week, so I apologize for that. I know we've got a few good, few guests coming up, and then I've got some solo shows coming up as well. So, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today on Revenue Through Reputation with my guest Scott.